Hello and welcome to the Captain's Table. I am your host, Dawn Deckman-Moeller, and today our guest is Belinda Busteed Burum. Belinda is a #1 international Amazon best-selling author. She is passionate about dancing, traveling, love, walking on the beach, and grammar. She has worked for decades as a writer and editor in journalism, advertising, and marketing communications. More recently, she researched discovering love in midlife and later trying to uncover the path to true and lasting love. Her wonderful book, Finding Love After 40, encourages readers to overcome discouragement, stay open to love, and take inspired action to find the love of their lives at any age. Belinda grew up in California and is currently bicoastal, living in Boston, in the Boston area, and near her 3 grown children and 3 grandchildren, and flying back and forth to California to be with her current and hopefully last love, Bob, who conveniently lives 5 minutes from the ocean. Belinda and Bob met when he was 62, and she was on her way to 67. And in a few weeks, they are planning to celebrate 5 years together. Welcome, Belinda.
Thank you, Dawn. It's so great to be here.
It is so great to be with you today, and I am so excited to share with our audience all of the fun tips in your book, Finding Love After 40. We have a wonderful audience, and we've got some great stories to share with you. We're going to take a real quick break early in the show and come right back to learn more about Belinda and her history in writing and how she got the inspiration in writing Finding Love After 40. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Table with our guest today, Belinda Busteed Burum. Belinda, let's talk about how you got into writing, what inspired you, a little bit about your history, and then how you found the inspiration in finding love after 40 and writing the book about it.
Yeah. Well, like I think I told you, I really never thought I'd write a book until the idea came to me. But I have been a writer forever, and it was kind of just what I do. Yeah, I thought when I got divorced after 25 years of a really pretty good marriage, but like I said, something was missing, and I finally, after years of agonizing, did leave. Anyway, I thought I would leave and find the perfect person right away.
Right.
Yeah, and I was I did meet people. I found what I felt was Mr. Passion, but that had some, that didn't work out quite like I thought. And then I was with somebody that was a good relationship, but I don't know, it was pretty rocky too after that. And I remember going somewhere with him and just to a colleague who had gotten married after, I think they'd both been divorced like twice. And there they were in midlife, like just sort of average people, but boy, were they happy. And I remember her talking about her Prince Charming, how this guy she was married was her Prince Charming, and she was so happy to wake up to him every morning and so grateful that they'd found each other at this point in life. And she meant it, and I thought, wow, people, they did it, how did they do that? What's their secret? So I had that idea then, like, maybe I should write a book about it. Because, when you want to learn how to do something, you write about it or teach it or something, right?
Right. You research it, correct. You talk to people.
And they had all these questions like, how do people find each other? Oh, yeah. Then after that, I kept thinking about it. And, when you're looking for a car and you see that car everywhere.
Yes.
So like this, all of a sudden I was I guess I mentioned to someone, I was maybe a couple of years later even, I was dating somebody else by that time, and they said, "Oh, you're thinking about writing a book about that? You ought to talk to Dee and John." And then one thing after another opened up like that. I just kind of kept meeting people, and that really kind of had something special about them. And so, yeah.
How many years when you first kind of had the idea? And I want to make sure our audience understands that not everybody can sit down and write a book. You have to understand grammar and the English language pretty well.
Well, but although a lot of people write books who don't. I've noticed that lately too.
Well, that's true. Get a ghostwriter and get a little bit of help. But what about a little bit about your history in as far as your resume?
Oh, yeah. Well, when I was in my 20s, I graduated from college with a music degree and didn't know quite what to do. Oh, yeah, but at the time I had worked for the college newspaper. And so
There you
I
go.
thought, then I went back to Pasadena City College, actually, and took journalism classes and ended up doing an internship at the Pasadena Star News.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah, that was my first job, and it was great. It kind of brought everything into focus for me. I was writing articles about people in town who were maybe not all that interesting, but I had to try to make it interesting. So it was good for my marketing that I later went into later.
Right, right.
So that was fun. I had a great time at the Star News. And then after that, later when I was married and I guess I was pregnant and I had a first child. I decided it would be too hard to be in newspapers, so I got a high-tech communications degree. And then I did another internship and ended up working in high tech I'm still working in high tech.
Yeah.
So decades. So that's my background. And then, yeah, then I had this idea about the book, but again, I felt bad that I didn't write it right away. I started interviewing people, and everywhere I went, sort of, if I saw someone good, I interviewed them.
Yes.
And got stories. So I started collecting all these stories. And then then I was on the East Coast at that time, and then I moved to the West Coast, started collecting more stories.
So when you collected the stories, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Did you record the couple? Did you take notes? How did you compile the details?
Yeah, I did record, and then I transcribed it. At that point, the technology for transcription software wasn't very good. So yeah, I would transcribe them, and then I actually wrote them up then. So I had all these stories I was kind of writing as I went.
Yes.
And then I guess it was 5 years later when I sort of felt like, okay, it was time to write it up. Even like I said, I felt guilty for 5 years that I wasn't actually writing the book.
But you were collecting what would be like your recipes for love.
Exactly. Yeah. And I thought about it, every time I talk to someone, I learned something myself, and I thought, well, maybe someone else would find something in their stories, because, most of the people are just ordinary people who'd kind of, I don't know, for one, they even sort of stumbled into love, or they didn't know what they were doing, but they managed to do it right, after, like I said, after a couple marriages and bad turns, and they finally got it right. So anyway, I just thought they all had different takes on it, and some had resisted love, and some, had really intentionally, I'm going to keep looking until I find the right thing, and I need this and I need that. Other people were like, no, I'm not talking to that person. You can't make me, but they ended up married. So, it seemed like there isn't a real recipe, but there are clues,
Well, there's the stories that you've collected, and myself, I found love after 40. I've been with my husband for 26 and a half years after a first marriage myself, and I was not looking. I mean, I was ready. I think that's the thing. I was ready. And the doors just kind of opened. And, there's a little bit of risk involved in, do I give my number out? Do I speak to this person?
Yeah.
And so the people that you interviewed, it was just kind of a word of mouth, or you just kind of, next thing you know, someone else is talking about a relationship. And like you said, I'm buying a red car. Now I just see red car. Now I just see people or talk to people every day that's, finding the love of their life after 40.
Right. And that's why most of the people in the book are from things that I do. I do dance. At the time I was dancing all the time. So you meet a lot of people. I took dance classes and stuff. And,
yes.
And back east, sort of, tantra class, or I knew people in various circles here. So it was mainly people that are kind of in my domain, but not necessarily that I knew well. But then some people I did know, but yeah, it's kind of like anything else, it kind of one thing after another, and it kind of opens up for you. And I love that about your story. I think you're right. It's like you kind of have to be ready, but you also have to kind of be at a good place within yourself,
I completely agree. I know that I was going through a box of some things, and I'd found a list that I had written years ago, and it was after my first marriage or after another relationship, and just my non-negotiables. And I have some friends that are single, and I've listened to their non-negotiables, and I think I thought to myself at one point in time, not everyone's going to have perfect teeth. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you gotta let go of a little bit, but
exactly.
But I had read my little non-negotiables, and lo and behold, my husband pretty much had met, and I think it was about just being accepted for who I am as a person, and I think we have to accept ourselves.
Exactly. And I think, like you said, some people, I mean, coming up with the non-negotiables are important, because if non-negotiables that they have to have blue eyes or something, that's not really going to give you, or, whatever. They have to be a certain height or a certain whatever.
Right.
Maybe those aren't really maybe it is a non-negotiable. But I think, the thing about being picky, some people are accused, oh, you're being too picky. Like you have to be discerning and know what you really need. Like it sounds like you had those non-negotiables.
Yes.
But at the same time, there was one woman I talked to who she thought she had to have a long-haired musician, and she was also really overweight and all this stuff. And she had, she didn't love herself. So she wasn't finding anybody until she first loved herself, and then also realized, maybe I don't need a long-haired musician. This hasn't totally worked out. And the guy she ended up with made her laugh,
Oh, that's so sweet.
But he had short hair, was not a musician at all. And so, but that's what she realized, like, oh, I don't need that other stuff. If he makes me laugh, that's what I need, and he didn't care about how she looked. So it was beautiful. It was
accepted each other for who they were, and just was more open. I mean, opposites,
exactly.
They always say opposites attract. I am completely opposite from my
really?
husband. I'm type A, and he is complete opposite. He's very, very shy, but we complement each other.
Yeah, exactly. I found that too with this. In fact, the first couple I actually interviewed, Dee and John, they were like that. They're totally opposites. He's like really quiet, and she's like the outgoing one. But yeah, at the same time, I think it's easier if you're the same, but maybe the spice isn't there either. If this opposite thing, is important.
Well, I think a lot of couples, I've talked to. Now you said I'm starting to see red cars. In talking to some friends of mine who are dating, I think recently someone said, we went on our first trip together. And that's when I found out if this was going to be someone I could date, and how well you travel. If you like to travel, how well does this person travel with me? Do they like to cook? I mean, some things can be so polar opposite that it could probably be a hindrance to developing a relationship. Right.
No, that's very interesting. And also some things can be, some things you can't, quote, change about anybody, but you can also kind of grow. Each of you can grow and learn to like, okay, well, maybe it's okay if he does this.
Right.
And maybe they can be like, okay, well, I can be a little more bending here. Like one of my friends I interviewed said, the trick is sort of how far can you bend without giving up yourself? You have little flexibility, but not brittle.
I like that.
Yeah.
So when you said it took about 5 years to accumulate your stories, what was going on in your life at that time when you said, you know what, I'm going to start this book? How did that moment happen for you?
I mean, when I first had the idea of the book?
When you first started to sit down and compose the book and write the book.
Well, that was just more logistics almost. I mean, at that time I was living with my mother in California. She was in her 90s, and I was there. And I was actually dating someone else who was at the beach.
Yes.
I like people at the beach.
You were in Southern Cal.
And then in my work situation, the company had split, and they weren't quite sure. It was reorganizing. And so a bunch of us were sort of like told, don't do any work, but don't go anywhere. So like, wow, this is a gift. I have time all of a sudden, because before that I never really had time. I was always running around as usual. But so I had this time, and I could sit down and actually write the book, and it was great. I'd sort of dreaded it, like anything else that you want to do, but it's like, oh man, this is a big deal, kind of out of your comfort zone. Even though as a writer, I hadn't written a book.
Right.
But suddenly I had the time, and it actually was a joy to pull it together. And then all those little stories kind of fell into what I hoped were at least logical groupings, that answered some of the questions that I had posed. And so, suddenly it kind of all came together at the end. And in fact, one woman I had interviewed earlier, somehow I was in touch with her again, and she'd moved on. She had actually found, she was an expert that I had talked to, but she had suddenly found the love of her life, and they're still together too. So it all just fell together. And then I wrote the book, and, managed to, it worked with somebody, helped to get it published. And
it was published in 2017. And and interesting, we talk to people about, oh, during COVID, I decided to do this. This was well before, the
Yeah.
whole COVID hit. What I loved about the book, and it's just a fantastic book for when our
Thanks.
audience goes out and gets it, because I can't wait to promote it.
Oh, thank you.
I love how way you broke out the part 1 and the chapters and the part 2. I love the font that you used.
Yeah.
I love the quotes from famous authors or songwriters that you have at the beginning. So it really did. It's a very easy read, and how you have the stories as vignettes.
Oh, good. I
Just
hope that works. Thank you.
yes, I just love that. So tell me a little bit more. You said you had worked with a writer also, or an editor?
Oh, an editor. Yeah, I decided I didn't know what I was doing about getting it published and what, so I found an editor somewhere online, and she helped me. And she also kind of helped me through the process of, I put it on Amazon, which is the easy part, but there are other
Sure.
places you can put books, and also you can submit it places to get it reviewed and things like that. So that was helpful.
Yeah.
I didn't really, and I helped work with someone to get it promoted. Actually, it's kind of a funny thing about getting to be a bestseller. It's one of these little tricks. If you get it in the right niche on the right day, and everybody's buying it or something, then it boosts you, and you're suddenly a #1 bestseller in that category.
I love that.
And then, I don't know. I feel a little guilty about that, but
No.
everyone seems to be doing that.
You have to know how to do it, and you have just some wonderful people, Indie Reader, Wendy A. Newman, that have
those
written
people
praises.
Yeah, actually, I did reach out to those people because she said, yeah, because I put, and I wrote at her and asked her, yeah, if I could use that. And some of these experts who have written these books were really very nice. They're all love experts.
Yes.
And, I'm not a love expert. I'm just a journalist type person. But these love experts were really very kind, and most wrote me back and, said I could use their quotes or whatever I had in the book. And yeah, so that was really nice.
Well,
Yeah.
and one of your quotes is an Amazon reviewer that says, insightful, well-researched, and an engaging read. We're going to take a real quick break right now, and we're going to come back and hear about some of Belinda's favorite stories of couples in her book. Stand by. Welcome back to the Captain's Table. We're here today with Belinda, and we're learning more about the book that she wrote, Finding Love After 40. They are real stories about real love in the prime of life and a little beyond. Welcome back, Belinda.
Thank you, John.
Well, in this segment, we'd love to hear more about some of the people that you interviewed in a little bit more depth. Maybe some contrasting stories for our audience to get an idea of the different types of circumstances that can lead people to love later in life.
Okay, sounds great. I wanted to say, too, one of the real drivers when this was, I needed hope myself that it's possible to find love at any age, and I wanted to give whoever read the book hope that no matter what their circumstances, no matter what they wanted, there was hope, they could do it. And also the other thing was, I feel like at any age you can find love. So I tried to get people who were various ages. And the oldest was one of my favorites. It was someone who was 87.
Uh-huh.
And it was someone my mother knew at church.
Oh.
And she'd come over. She was so excited. She wanted to tell my mother that she had a boyfriend now.
Oh, how sweet.
And I thought, well, yeah, okay, but she was like, it was as if they were teenagers. And she had reconnected with her name. Well, I couldn't even use her real name because she was afraid people at church might not approve, of the, because they were they never living together, but they were meeting up sort of in sin, and but anyway, she was so excited. And this guy, she had reconnected with, it was someone they had known as a couple. Her husband had died 10 years before, and she was not looking for love. She was happy with her life and had a daughter who was developmentally disabled, who she was kind of responsible for. Mm-hmm. Anyway, she reconnected with this man whose wife had died like a year before. He was turning 90, and she thought, she should throw him a little birthday party. So she threw him a little birthday party at her house, and after the party, he kissed her by the refrigerator.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And yeah, and the whole week she was like, oh my goodness. I had no idea this was even, and she was just a flutterer, and And he was, yeah, I met him at some point in the church parking lot after that, and he was a real dynamo. He
Oh,
really had a twinkle in his eye. He played tennis, he drove. So they had this sort of long distance relationship for a few years. Even when she ended up moving into assisted living, I think they were together 3 or 4 or 5 years, and
uh-huh.
before she died, and then he died maybe a year after that. But,
Oh,
you know,
goodness.
isn't that great though? Even at 87, it's not too late.
It's not too late. I know there's a common phrase I've heard, I wish I had known you sooner so we could be together longer. And
Yeah.
it sounds like that 5 years that they had together. I mean, who would have ever known, that could
Yeah,
happen?
exactly. And it was such a gift. She was just so grateful for any time they had together and grateful for whatever they did have.
Uh-huh.
I think that's the other thing. People, they don't have as much time, but they really cherish the time. Whatever time they have, they really appreciate the other person.
Yes.
I think when you're younger, you get involved, you have kids or whatever, and you appreciate the other person, but you're not living in gratitude each day for it.
Exactly. And there's another phrase, it's not the years in your life, it's the
Yeah,
life in your years.
it's true, isn't it?
It's
Yeah. And I
it's
think, yeah. And I think gratitude is a hallmark of all the stories. They're just so grateful that, as I say, at this time in my life, I met someone who was perfect for me
uh-huh.
at that. So yeah, so I loved her. The other person was the first one of my favorites was the first person I really interviewed, and her name was Dee, and she let me use her name. And she was a
D.
real outspoken Southern woman, and she was 40 when she met John, or she felt she wanted someone in her life. She'd been divorced for a while from someone who had cheated on her the whole time they were married. She'd gotten married too young, but anyway, now she was 40 and she
Mm-hmm.
had a couple daughters, and she saw someone in a sort of a dance bar kind of place. She
Yeah.
was a dancer. Oh, well, sorry, I should back up. The reason I wanted to interview her is because the guy I was seeing said, "Oh, you ought to interview Dee." She said she wanted a dance partner, a lover, and a friend, and if she didn't have all three, she wasn't going to do it.
Oh.
So I thought, wow, there's someone who really knows what she wants. So I talked to Dee, and sure enough, she had said that to her. Sorry, my granddaughter's
That's so
outside.
cute.
She'd met John at a bar or whatever, and they were. It was a dancing bar, and I think she had taught the achy breaky dance or something like that.
Cute.
He had
Yeah.
noticed her.
Sure.
Anyway, she saw him and
Line
she thought, oh, he
dancing.
looks pretty cute,
Uh-huh.
And so she stopped him and said, "Hey, could you sit down?" And she asked him, like, "Are you seeing anybody?" "Nope." Are you here with anybody at the moment?" "Nope." "Okay." It seemed like there was one other question I've forgotten, but basically, okay, he was available.
Checking the boxes off.
Yeah, you can go now. So he went, and then later she was like asking her daughters, like, "What should I do? I like this guy," and they said, "Call him." She said, "What? Call him?" So she did. She worked up her courage and asked if he'd like to go out for coffee sometime,
Uh-huh.
and he said, "Sure." And she said, "When?" "How about now?" Or "How about tonight?" So out they went, and she was surprised to find out he was only 29, and so, but she was like, "Well, whatever." She was 40, he was 29, but she said she was actually the young one. He was kind of older in his spirit, She was the one who wanted to go parachute jumping or whatever.
It sounds like
Anyway.
my husband and myself.
Really? Interesting.
Cute.
Yeah. So they started going out, but even after that, oh yeah, then she asked him if he'd go to this dance class with her,
Uh-huh.
and she was really disappointed that he did not show up.
Oh.
And it happened again. He didn't show up.
Oh,
She's
no.
like,
How
okay.
sad.
So she was like, well, okay. But, it's only been, I don't know, was it 6 months or so? I forget how long they've been dating at the time. And, but that's when she actually told him, I'm looking for a lover, a friend, and a dance partner. And if you can't be all three, I don't need one separate from the others.
Oh, she had her non-negotiables.
Yeah. And because she said she knew that's what she needed to be fulfilled, And he was like, really? And she said, yes, really. And we're not far enough along in this relationship for it to matter.
Okay. So she was.
So, yeah, she was got friend.
So did she end that? Did that relationship end?
Well, they kind of didn't say anything more about it. And at that time, I think she went on a trip and he went on a trip. And when he came back, I think when she came back, he picked her up at the airport, but she didn't say anything. He dropped her off. And then next time she went to the dance class, he was there.
Oh. Oh,
So, and that was it. So he decided he was going to give it a try.
okay.
And then she started to push the envelope a little bit further. She told the teacher, train us for this competition that's coming up, but don't tell him right now.
Oh, she was
Yeah.
strategic.
Yeah, strategic. And then at one point she realized she did need to tell him. So she said, hey, I'd really like to do this competition. Would you be up for it? And he said, sure. And like she said, he even was willing to wear like purple and pink outfit for this thing. And they did the competition and she was like shaking through the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
She was like, oh man, I'm never doing that again. But he was like, when's the next competition? This is great.
Oh, I love that.
So from then on, they competed and they both, when I met them, they were both teaching dance and they were married. But, marriage wasn't even something that was on the table for her. She just wanted a companion and a lover. But she also did ask him at some point, you're 29. Are you going to want to have more kids? Because I don't want to have more kids. I can't have more kids. And he said, nope. So at every point she made sure that she wasn't had blinders on.
That's very smart.
Yeah. She wasn't afraid to ask for what she needed and abandon it if it wasn't going to work.
I also love that. Sorry about that. I also love that one of her kids is the one that originally encouraged her. Make a call. Yeah. Sometimes our kids, when mom and dad or out in the dating world, in their 40s or whatever, that sometimes our grown kids can have some wisdom there and encourage people to find love after 40. Well, tell me another story. Is there anyone, I know that a lot of men and women have a biological time clock, and in our early 20s and 30s, that thing is clicking away. And there's a little bit of relief after menopause.
Absolutely. We don't really have to worry about, got to find someone in the next year and get married and have the kid within 2 years. Right.
Exactly. Right. Does that change? Does that change how people?
I think it definitely. Yeah. In fact, that makes me think of Tenley. Also, her daughter was the one who said, you ought to get online. And she had a terrible experience. But in any case, there was Tenley who was in her 50s when she'd sort of given up on love.
Uh-huh.
She had her kids and she was like, maybe I'll just go live near my son, live out my life in peace in Santa Ynez Valley. But then, that's when her daughter, I think, said, you better go online. You should meet somebody. So she went online and she met somebody. And in the book, I talk about how she went on a walk around the Rose Bowl and she couldn't wait to get home. And she was like, I'm not doing this again. Although she probably would have, she said, if she really had to. But then she ended up meeting up with Rob, who was widowed.
Okay.
I know. Yeah. And he'd only been widowed for about a year. And she said, she was just out of the kindness of her heart. She volunteered to go out for coffee or whatever with him if he needed somebody. But she was the only one who was doing that. I guess every other widow in town was, or every other, single older lady was kind of trying to bring him casseroles and because he was a retired attorney and, good looking. And when she met him, he was 67. And I guess he hadn't actually married this second woman, but was planning to when she died of cancer. And he'd been with her for 7 years. So he was still grieving. But Tinley went to the funeral. Oh, yeah. And then, that's when she told him if he was there if she needed her. But later they ended up meeting at a birthday party for their mutual hairdressers.
Oh, how ironic.
And at the, they had a hug that she described as sort of, well, that was something. and they would talk to other people. And then afterwards they ended up talking. And this is one of the characteristics I've seen over and over. All these people say, we talked forever. The first time they really got together.
Yes.
Dee did that too. They just talked and talked. And Tenley said they just talked and talked after everybody had left the party. They just talked and talked. And then after that, they started seeing each other. So it was beautiful. It was hard for him.
That is beautiful.
Yeah. She, I think a lot of times with widowers, it's hard for them to take down the pictures. I have a friend who has the same thing. He has pictures of his wife up. She's been gone for 4 years. But with Tenley, she was a little disturbed by that, but she talked to a therapist and realized, okay, maybe it was good to sort of start developing their own time together. So she gently started encouraging him to put away a few of the pictures and, open up space for themselves.
Oh, that just warms and kind of breaks my heart. I think I've seen a few movies in my lifetime where there would have been a scene like that in a film of taking down
Yeah.
some photos and adding some of your own new memories.
Right, because you never, I mean, people who are widowers say they never really want to leave the person or get over them entirely because that person's always going to be there.
Yes.
So the new person has to be able to accommodate that, but also be willing to say, hey, I'm here now,
Well,
you know?
we all have our history.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
part of what makes us who we are. But that's a wonderful story between Rob and Tenley.
And the thing is, I think you like this quote too. She said that, she's seen her life as a journey and all the things happen, and she's grateful that she found love then when she did, because, like, to quote her, she said, there's love, an intense love that maybe only appears when you're ready for it later in life.
Oh, see?
You know?
I love that.
Yeah. And I think that's true. All these things that we go through, we think, oh, we're messing up or whatever, but we're learning stuff as we go, right?
And we're just not ready for it sometimes until we have a little
Yeah.
more wisdom under our belt about
Exactly.
about
And
ourselves.
yeah, exactly. And even then,
Experience.
there are moments of like, am I doing it right? Of another friend of mine at the end said, we look at other people's lives and we think, wow, they're really doing it right. They've got it figured out. I think we always think everyone else has it figured out and we don't quite have it figured out.
I was driving down the street. We live somewhat in the country, and I saw a cow leaning through some fence, eating the green grass on the other side, and it made me. It literally yesterday, and it made me think. The grass is greener sometimes on the other side of our lives.
It's so true. It's so true. It's funny. And, I've talked to people like that I thought had the perfect marriage. And I felt bad that I had left my marriage because it was really pretty good. But they're still in their marriage. And I thought, wow, they got the perfect family and the perfect husband. But they had been looking at my life thinking, maybe they should have left their husband because I did.
Well,
But
that's the whole thing is the grass really greener on the other side?
yeah.
We all have our own stories. We're going to take another final break, and then we're going to come back, and Belinda, I want you to share with our audience some stories of celebrities that also found love after 40. Stand by. Welcome back to the Captain's Table. I hope you're enjoying listening to Belinda tell us some wonderful stories that you'll find in her book, Finding Love After 40. Now, I wanted to save kind of the best for last. I love celebrities. I'm sorry. Ask my husband. But I'd love to hear some stories from you about different celebrities and some of their journeys.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it is fun. I mean, I love watching celebrities too, and because we get to live their lives kind of vicariously, or at least see the mistakes they're making, and
Yes.
they're out there. So, I mean, probably one of the most famous, I don't know, was George Clooney.
Yes,
Who
George.
was at 60. Everyone thought he's never going to get married, and he'd said he was never going to get married, and he dated all these beautiful women, and then suddenly, whoops, he was getting married to someone who was amazingly accomplished, and who
Amal.
was only, yeah, she was 35, Amal, right. And what I thought was interesting too about that story was, here she had everything, looks, brains, she was high-powered attorney who was
Yes.
doing wonderful things for the world.
Yes, she
But
was.
even she was having trouble. She thought she was despairing. She thought she'd never find anybody.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, so maybe it's harder when you have everything because the grass is, maybe you have more options. The grass does seem greener. I don't know. But she wasn't going to settle for somebody who, well, who wasn't up to her standards. So, but anyway, yeah, I thought it was, and they just kind of met at a party, but she wasn't really jumping on it right away because, well, George Clooney, he
Yeah.
kind of had a reputation.
Yeah, he
Um,
had a reputation.
yeah, and I heard later that she was, that she was up front too. I didn't have this in the book, but someone was saying she told him when they did get together for their first date that like she was really very interested. Her vision was to have a family, to be married,
Yeah.
and if he wasn't on board with that, it wasn't going to work.
Right.
And then
Right.
he said, "Oh yeah, I can be on board with that."
You know what? I could just see him saying that. I mean, because 60 years old and 35, that's
Right,
quite a few years
exactly.
in
And
between.
also, even though he had apparently, said that he to most of the women he was dating, he wasn't going to get married.
Uh-huh.
Apparently around that time, like you were, he was sort of feeling ready. I think
I hope so.
yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah,
if he's going to be a dad, he might as well get cracking. But I think
absolutely.
he'd also seen Brad Pitt's family life and was like, oh, that's nice,
Uh-huh.
other people's. So, yeah, I guess he was actually ready for a relationship, even though the world didn't know it. Maybe he knew it. Not that I know what George Clooney's thinking, but anyway, and yeah, and so I thought it was great that, oh yeah, and it started what they called the George Clooney effect, right?
What is that?
Well, I guess it's two things. One of them is men actually, well, there's been the mystique, like men want to date someone dumber, younger, and beautiful or whatever. But he sort of was willing or happy to date someone who was making more money and better educated and more intellectual than he was. He joked about he was marrying up, even
Oh,
though he was really one of the most eligible bachelors, but she really was more accomplished in a way and, high saving the world and all this. So that made it okay, I guess, for
yes.
men to
Yes.
date women who were accomplished. I mean, not that
Interesting.
it wasn't really okay before, but,
I think
and the other part
yes,
that
go ahead.
I read about the George Clooney effect is another thing that older people or older men, I guess, are more attractive because they're comfortable in their own skin,
Mm-hmm.
which is true. Like that's one of the things about being older and dating. Hopefully, we are more at ease with who we are.
Well,
We know who we are. We're not embarrassed about who we are.
I think that's where the cougar effect came in, which was pretty popular about a decade ago. The
It's
cougars.
true. I guess we're both
Women,
cougars, and
yeah,
I don't know.
women being comfortable in their skin, the George Clooney effect or the cougars. I haven't heard that terminology in a while, but that was pretty
No,
popular.
I know it was. I mean, you're a cougar, I guess, and I'm a cougar too.
we
But
exactly. I'm not
I
now,
mean,
but I was.
well, I mean, it's in the sense of being with someone younger, I guess, is a
Yes.
cougar, right?
Well, I think of
So,
Paul McCartney when I'm 64.
right, and exactly, and he was another one that's cool. Apparently, I guess everyone knows he married again, for the third time.
Yes.
When he was, whoops, how old was he? Now he's 81. He was
He's
65, I think, when he met her.
he's
But
81. Wow.
yeah, and they've been together 12 years now, and she's 64 now. His wife that he married when he was, isn't that funny?
That's
And
funny.
apparently they're really happy. So yeah, he says he's a hopeless romantic.
Oh, how I bet he
One
is.
of
My
these people who,
goodness.
yeah, I mean, and he says he tries to do nice things for her now.
Oh, how
Um,
sweet.
and Katie Couric
Love
also,
her.
yeah, and she took her 15 years to find her second husband. Now I'm trying to think. Yes,
Yes.
yeah, she was older too.
Uh-huh.
She was 57, a little bit older. She was 57
We're
and
the
he was
same age.
51. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
So
cool.
she's happily married. I mean, she had I know her story and has two grown
Yeah,
children and who
yeah,
knows,
I mean
maybe one of her daughters said, "Mom, get online," or she probably was introduced to her current husband.
yeah, I think they met through mutual friends, but she had done whatever she could to find someone, and I think she was online throughout that time because 15 years. Yeah, she thought she'd find somebody right away too. But one thing I like about what she said was, not to be too hard on people when you're dating,
Mhm.
because we're all trying and we all have baggage. But I love what she said. She said, everyone has a lot of baggage. It's just, can you fit it into the overhead bin?
That is a great quote.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, who else?
So,
Who else, as far as celebrities,
well,
that you want
Carol
to highlight?
Channing was one that I really liked because, one of the ways people tend to meet up, like she met someone who was her childhood sweetheart. She dated in junior high, um, and other people have reunited with people. In fact, I met someone who I met at my high school reunion. We dated for a little while, but
Uh
a lot
huh.
of people
Very common.
reunite. Yeah, it's very common. And for one reason or other, they got separated in life. Some regret it. Some felt it was just what needed to happen. But yeah, Carol Channing was crazy about this guy when she was in junior high. His name
Oh,
was Harry Hulihi. I don't know how to say his
how
last name.
sweet.
And they were both in the band together. And sometimes they had a little side band too. And she would sing and she would follow him around. But they got separated, and over the years. And he got married. She was married 3 times. Her,
Uh-huh.
she was married to her manager for 30 years, but apparently that wasn't very happy. And then um, I guess his husband had died a year before, and a mutual friend, Mervyn of the Mervyn's department stores, had read her autobiography.
Oh my
And she had
gosh.
mentioned Harry. I read her autobiography too. And she had mentioned, at great length about Harry, how she loved him and stuff. And this guy, Mervyn, said, Harry, you ought to call Carol,
Mervyn.
and Harry said, is she still alive?
Oh my
She's,
gosh.
but
Oh.
he said she's turning 82. She was going to turn 83 like the next day or something. So he called her on her birthday,
Uh-huh.
and they said, well, we ought to get together. So they did.
Oh.
And she said, they went on talking as if they were still 15. They just picked up after that as if the years, had just
Oh,
disappeared.
that is
And
fantastic.
yeah, and they were married 3 months later.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah,
Mer-
and they were together for until he died at 98. So that was,
oh, I did not know
no,
that
no, I'm
story.
sorry,
I would
she
have
died at 98.
never.
He was 92 or something when he
Yeah,
died.
but I
But
would have never, ever in my well, when I read that, that's why I definitely want you to highlight Carol Channing. And, it's Mervyn's department stores from West Coast. That is just a fantastic story. I love that. Want you to share about Gloria Steinman and,
oh, right,
and
yeah,
Christian Bale's father.
yeah, that was sweet but sad. Actually, I don't have that one down in front. Yeah, where'd it go? Yeah, she ended up marrying him and they only had a couple of years together,
Uh-huh.
didn't they? But she was grateful for the time they had and what he taught her about death.
Mm, God bless her. I love that. Now, I know you have a couple other that we're going to share. We have a few minutes left in our show. So please go on.
Yeah, let's see. I'm trying to, yeah, well, I mean, Gloria Steinem, yeah, sorry. Um, One thing I liked was Selma Hayek.
Yes,
She
Selma.
married a businessman as well.
She
And
did.
yeah, and she was saying, she dated a bunch of other people, and she was like worried throughout her life that if she'd known, but that she didn't know what she was doing, and she dated all these people, and she worried that she would ever meet anybody. And she told herself later, I wish I knew when I was younger that I was going to fall crazy in love with a perfect man.
Oh,
Yeah. She was so worried, and she dated all these people, and
and
she
she's
got
so
desperate.
beautiful and so talented
Yeah,
and funny.
exactly. And then she did meet Francois, and they got together, but then they even had problems, and then they got separated for a while, and then they got back together, and they've been happy ever since. So she learned whatever she needed to learn. They got back together, and they're still together.
They certainly
So
are.
yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, some people feel like they've found the love of their life, and oops, I guess it wasn't even, or whatever reason they go on. But a lot of these people, when they've really done it right, they have done it right.
Well, what?
See, well, I did want to say Rupert Murdoch,
Tell
as
me.
we say. Just, I wrote about Jerry Hall at the time they had gotten married, and it looked like that was going to be his last marriage, but I guess he decided to dump her.
It's unbelievable.
But one thing I liked about what she said was, though, she liked dating older men because it made her feel younger.
Very smart.
But anyway, but now he's engaged again for the sixth time to someone who's 67.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So they're
Of
supposed
course
to get
he
married
is.
So I guess in a way he's also a romantic, even though he said he dreaded falling in love again.
Oh my
But
goodness.
what the heck, why not? So if he can do it, I don't know. I guess everyone can do it.
Well, I just love these stories. There are so many stories about just everyday couples like myself out in the world that are finding love after 40. You just never know what's going to happen. In Belinda's book, she has numerous stories about celebrities finding love after 40. It's just a great read. I highly recommend it. Belinda, let us know how our audience can purchase the book.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. That's the best way to get it, I guess. Thanks for asking.
Uh-huh.
Like I told you, I did have a website, but it's not up at the moment. Hopefully I'll get it back up again. But I even had pictures of all the people. I thought it was kind of cool.
Well, I love that. And if you do get that back up again, let me know, and we can always tag that information when we launch The Captain's Table show.
Okay.
on our Facebook page. And if you are all subscribers or follow us, this show will be on in the very near future. Share with your friends, like us. We also have the captainstable.com website that is being reconstructed at the time. But we appreciate you, Belinda. I love this book. I can't wait to start. I'm going to start promoting it right away to everybody I know, because let me tell you something. I have a lot of friends that are single in their 50s.
I hope they still have hope, because don't let them give up if they really want it.
Some of them have. So I'm hoping this brings hope back into their lives, and I'm sure it will, because it's been inspiring for me, even though I have found the love of my life. And goodness gracious, I can't wait to meet you one of these days, maybe down in Dana Point. We're both. I'm a Burbank girl. You're a Pasadena girl, right?
Yep.
So we are
That'll
neighbors, and looking forward to that time. In the meantime, thank you everybody for joining us today on the Captain's Table, and thank you, Belinda. You have a great day now.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.